Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Melanie Reese, the Director of Cadre, and I'm joined by our Cadre staff, Noella Bernal and Kelly Rauscher. Today, we're bringing you the second part of our two-part webinar series on maximizing participation of the entire IEP team for better student outcomes. And today, we're focusing on strategies, tools, and resources. This webinar is being translated simultaneously into Spanish and into American Sign Language. To access the accessibility features, please follow these instructions. We have a few technical notes. First, all lines are muted. The presenters will answer questions posted in the question box at the end of the session. Chances are that we will not be able to address all of the questions that come in, and we will prioritize those that have the broadest application for our national audience. We ask that you post questions in the question box and not in the chat, unless they're technologically related. This helps us to smoothly monitor the questions. And we want to thank you in advance for taking the time to respond to the brief survey at the end of the presentation. Your feedback is important to us at Cadre and helps us to continue to be able to bring you webinars such as this one. And finally, we'll let you know that the webinar is being posted and will be archived on Cadre's website. Today we have 4 parts to this webinar. I will start us off by discussing the Cadre continuum of dispute resolution options, and will then turn the time over to our esteemed colleagues to share innovative practices for addressing concerns arising out of disagreements over services for children with disabilities. First, we'll hear from Denise Lambert, educational consultant from the California Department of Education's Special Education Division Constituents Office. The Constituents Office is dedicated to enhancing communications and support for families. Their office takes calls, answers questions, and makes referrals. Then we'll learn about the High Quality IEP project from Executive Director Heather DeFede and her team. High Quality IEPs works collaboratively within the California's statewide system of support to increase the knowledge and engagement of families and students and build local level capacity. Additionally, they also provide technical assistance to LEAs identified by the California Department of Education as needing targeted assistance. And finally, we'll be joined again by Carol Thies of DREDF, the Disability Rights and Education Defense Fund. Cheryl leads the Parent Training and Information Center serving families of children with disabilities in Northern California. And she'll be offering tips for school teams and parents for building a collaborative working environment. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. The IDEA provides 3 options to resolve disputes that state agencies must oversee and maintain. And under the IDEA, if there are disagreements over special education or early intervention services, support and relief can be sought by requesting mediation or a state complaint, or requesting a due process hearing to resolve the complaint. Each of these required options are critical to ensuring a full continuum of options for resolving disagreements that may arise related to the identification, evaluation, placement, or provision of FAPE for a child with disability. However, there are more options than those that are available under the IDEA. The Cadre continuum of dispute resolution processes and practices provides a model to explore those options available to families, schools, and service providers. In Cadre's continuum, we've categorized the available options by the levels of intervention. As with any model, there are generalities made, and each option may include elements of other categories, but generally we can look at the options for resolving conflict by the following 5 levels of intervention: prevention, disagreement, expressed conflict, the procedural safeguards offered under the IDEA, and legal review. Prior to the procedural safeguards, which includes all of the IDEA options that I mentioned previously, the mediation, written state complaints, and due process hearings, we have early dispute resolution options. These options can be offered at the local level, or at the state agency can manage them as well. The next section of the Cadre continuum provides examples of assistance or intervention. Again, as they are placed on the continuum, the first three sections of prevention, disagreement, and conflict are the early dispute resolution options. On our website, if you click on any of these individual practices, you will find the examples that Cadre has identified and explained. For example, you could find parent-to-parent assistance, or you could click on facilitation models or ombuds programs. Cadre offers these examples of processes and practices from across the nation. And for example, if you clicked on the ombuds person option, you'll find a select list of ombuds programs from north to south and coast to coast. Finally, on the continuum, we've identified various dimensions of conflict resolution that help clarify the placement of the practices on the continuum. Generally speaking, those on the left side of the continuum are more informal and flexible as compared to those on the right side of the continuum. On the left side, decisions are made by the people who are directly impacted by the situation, as opposed to the right side, where the locus of control of decisions is more often made by a third party, like the state agency or a hearing officer. While the rights of the parties are of utmost concern across the continuum, the left side is able to focus more on the interests of the participants as well. Do note that the procedural safeguards section is like its own little continuum, where mediation would fall more to the left side of the continuum and due process on the right, being more formal, fixed, and decisions made by hearing officers. On our website, the Cadre Continuum offers a searchable database of dispute resolution practices, and we are always on the lookout for promising practices and innovations that we can share out. If something cool is happening in your state, please reach out to us so that we can add it to our continuum. Which brings us to today's presenters, who will share their innovations and approaches to resolving disputes at the lowest level appropriate. I'm going to turn the time over to Denise Lambert, the educational consultant from the California Department of Education's Special Education Division, Constituents Office. So welcome, Denise.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Once again, my name is Denise Lambert, and I am representing Dr. Rachel Heenan, who is the Director of Special Education at the Department of Education. I'm especially excited to be here and to share the project with you because it represents a key initiative for Dr. Heenan and our team in special education. Today, I'm going to be discussing how the Constituents Office is designed to enhance support for families and educational partners. Next slide, please. So it's been a long road for us, a lot of hard work. Like I said, this was the idea of Dr. Heenan and something that she wanted to bring to the special ed department. And so we're excited now to be announcing that the Constituents Office has been opened. It opened in October. We're a very small office, but we're already making a huge impact. The Constituents Office was primarily created to enhance communication and to support for families who need assistance with issues related to their child's education. The Constituents Office acts as a key point of contact for families, offering a dedicated resource to help resolve their concerns and more efficiently. And it's just not for family, it's for community members, advocates, whoever is working with a child and feels that there needs to be some support or there's some concerns. We open the opportunity for these people to call in and speak with us regarding their concerns. Next slide. So at the CDE, we're deeply committed to making sure every family feels heard, valued, and supported in their interactions with the Special Education Division. Our key goal is that we're here to ensure that issues are resolved effectively at the LEA level in a timely manner. The functions of the Constituents Office, one of them is to handle incoming calls and actively listen to concerns from families and educational partners. This can be very lengthy calls, but I definitely feel it gives us the opportunity and to understand the concerns from the parties calling in, and also, as I expressed, that it gives them the opportunity to be heard. And a lot of times that when the callers are calling in, they're very frustrated, upset over whatever the situation might be. So we're providing that opportunity for them to be heard and hopefully giving them the resources that they need. Next slide, please. We're also providing immediate support when possible for more complex issues. We'll refer cases out to our appropriate units within our department or to our partners, and one of those happened to be on the line with us, Pathways to Partnership. And when we first started the Constituent's office, we started by actively working complaints that had already been submitted over to the department. We reached out to callers or to families and advocates and asked if they would be interested in doing alternative dispute resolution. If they were interested, then we would reach out to Pathways to Partnership and work with them to provide this service. Now we're able to do some of this in-house, but Pathways to Partnership was a key participant in us rolling out the Constituent's office and actually developing the idea of what the Constituent's office would look like and the supports that it would provide. Lastly, if it's necessary, the Constituent's office will submit concerns over to our complaints department to explore or to file a complaint. But once again, we want to provide the opportunity for families not to necessarily file the complaint, but to go through alternative dispute resolution. And like I said, we've been working with Pathways to Partnership on that. And I don't know, Aubrey, if you wanted to chime in on anything at this point.
No, not really that I can think of, except it has been such an honor to work alongside the California Department of Education and Dr. Rachel Heenan's vision, and Pathways to Partnership is so happy to be part of this process. And we are still very new, but it has been very successful so far.
Thank you. Next slide. So the benefits for SELPA and families, the Constituent's office collaborates with SELPA to ensure the families and LEAs within our communities are supported. The Constituent's office helps to streamline the resolution process, minimizing delays and improving the quality of responses to families and their concerns. We're also collaborating to strengthen our collective efforts to resolve issues at the LEA level while providing families with confidence in the system. So once again, we are that opportunity for our families to be heard. Hopefully being able to work with those families at the lowest level, alternative dispute resolution. But we're also finding that the calls coming in that we're able to assist within our units, within our department to answer questions. As it's been shared, sometimes families do not know what the SELPA is, or sometimes they haven't reached out to their LEA. So taking or providing them the opportunity to connect with their LEA or to the SELPAs has been very helpful in streamlining the number of complaints that are coming in. Next slide. So the Constituent's office, looking at our numbers, so we've had over 600 calls come in, but this is both to our 800 line and to our division line. But within these calls, we've had the opportunity, along with the partnership with Pathways to Partnership, to work on alternative dispute resolution cases. And we've worked over 30 to 40 cases at this point, not resolved at this point, but definitely continuing to work with the families towards resolution to the concerns that they have. So we're really excited that we've had this opportunity. We're excited that we've had the opportunity to open this office to provide the service to our families and to our community members. Next slide. This is the contact information for the Constituent's office. We have a 1-800 number as well as our email here. And next slide, or not email, but our link. And so that's the Constituent's office. I thank you for listening, and we are open to any questions that you might have at the end. And once again, thank you for having us.
Sorry about that. I had trouble getting off mute. Thank you, Denise. I'll hand it to the Executive Director, Heather DeFede, and her team from the High Quality IEP Project.
Hi, thank you for having us today. As Melanie introduced, my name is Heather DeFede. I'm the Executive Director for East County Special Education Local Plan Area, which is a SELPA, or how LEAs across the state of California are clustered. I know they're in BOCES in other states, so there are a variety of ways. So within our East County SELPA, we do have the High Quality IEPs project, and we have some contact information, but we'll also share that in the chat for you and as well at the end of the slides. So if we can go to the next slide, let me introduce our team. My day job is a SELPA, or Special Education Local Plan Area Director, and our SELPA, which is located in San Diego County, applied with Santa Clara County SELPA for a statewide grant on IEP best practices. We are funded by the California Department of Education as a part of the statewide system of support that we've developed here in California. And on our team, we have Jennifer Yales, who is our lead person for the team that works solely on the grant. We have Noreen Lippincott and Hinda Nadif. So on the next slide, you'll see that with our project, we really spent a lot of time being thoughtful and how we are approaching this work on IEP best practices. And what we have really grounded ourselves is in as Melanie was sharing the continuum, we are on the far left side with prevention. We are really looking at the IEP through the many faces of the IEP team members, and really building the capacity of the parents, the educators, and the students themselves, so that we recognize all members of the IEP team have value. And we're really trying to, in building that capacity level, the power dynamic, so that everyone has the information and can participate equitably in the IEP process. And our first year that we've just finished, our first year of our grant, we've really grounded ourselves in meaningful participation in the meeting, and this capacity building is a key component of that. So as we look at the IEP, in our work, we're really seeing it as a journey. So throughout the entire school year, there are things that happen before the IEP. There's the hour, 2 or 3 that the IEP meeting occurs, and then there's the after the IEP. And we really recognize that all these pieces and components are vital in not only helping families and supporting families to participate meaningfully in the IEP and have their voice heard during the IEP, but also making sure it's implemented after the IEP. So it's really a whole entire process. Next slide, please. So our vision, I'm not going to read this to you, I promise, but as I listened in our first session, which hopefully many of you joined the first session of this 2-part series, I really heard a lot of voices about parents not feeling that they were being listened to or dismissed. And unfortunately, there are team members of the IEP process that have felt that way. And our goal is really to support the process of the IEP so that we can do a lot of work on prevention and have that meaningful engagement, so that parents are feeling a part of the process, their voices heard, which is ultimately going to result in better outcomes for our students. So on the next slide, today I'm hoping to cover for you just a little bit about our project, what we've done in our first year as far as research and findings, and also take you through some of our resources we've developed in our first year and give you a sneak preview on what's coming soon. Next slide. So as we dive into, on the next slide, our research and findings that we completed in year 1. Go ahead and advance. Thanks. So we spent a lot of time grounding ourselves in research. And as I shared with Melanie before the call started, some of that research included Cadre's resources, even as we were developing the grant application and looking of ways and practices in that prevention strand of where we could really support families. We've also looked at student-led IEPs as one of the prevention strategies that Cadre highlights in some of their articles, but also for the outcomes of students and self-determination. So we've done a lot of research that we are grounding our work and efforts on. We also, within the state of California, have conducted a gap analysis on our needs. There are some great federal projects, Progress Center, IRIS Center, and we have researched those, used those resources as appropriate, but we also looked within California, and there wasn't really a hub of within our state of all of these resources and materials that are needed for educators, students, and families. We spent our first year last year doing that gap analysis and also doing surveys. We've surveyed our family empowerment centers, shared surveys through them. We've gotten educator feedback, administrator feedback, and parent feedback over the last year. And in California, with our state advisory commission, we also have student commissioners that we reached out to get the student voice as well. We've presented in this past first year of over 20 times last year for over 1,000 participants, and we have partnered within that statewide system of support in California. And our friends at Pathways to Partnership that Denise referred to, they are also part of that statewide system of support. We've also intentionally partnered with our Exceptional Family Resource Center, which is a family empowerment center / family resource center here in the San Diego area. Next slide. So what did we do with all of those data points? And if you can just keep clicking through these, Melanie, thanks. So we have you can click again. Sorry, everything's flying in. There you go. So we have a lot of data that we synthesized from that research, from the surveys that we conducted. You'll see that there were several themes that came out from educators where there were really needs around examples, resources for parent training resources, simplifying the IEP, understanding IDEA law and parental rights, and IEP best practices and goals. And on the next slide, you'll see a lot of those same themes on the parents and guardians slide, where their themes were IEP basics, how to promote inclusive opportunities for parent training and resources, how to connect to parent agencies, and meaningful engagement. So you'll see we really took this and all of the data we collected and have developed not only our resources, but our website following all of this information. So what I'm going to do on the next slide, and if you go to this following slide, we're going to dive right into our resources. Typically at this point, we go directly to our website, but with this group, we're going to just show you slides, but we encourage you to go ahead and click on our link, highqualityiep's.net, and follow along with us. So on the next slide, once you land on our homepage, you'll see that those same 3 roles of the IEP where we feel those IEP team members have value, you can choose your role within our website. You can do it down in the bottom or up in the tabs. This year, we're really grounding our resources around educators so that they have the tools and materials to then support our parents and families. So next year, all of our resources will be on the families. And then we also, the final year, we'll be doing resources and materials for students. We have some in each of those areas, but this year, what you'll see is our educator toolkit and how we are, our intention to build out for families and students with those voices in as part of the process. So on the next slide, you'll see once you click on the role, we have the IEP toolkit. And we are really honoring that journey of before, during, and after the IEP. And in partnering with our Family Resource Center, they really recognized that there was a place we needed to begin even before the IEP. So we have listened to their voice and have added in a section where you go for a place to begin. So on the next slide, if you click through that place to begin, you'll see some of the foundational pieces that we talk about, where we talk about, you can go ahead and click there should be 2 more clicks. There you go. So there are different resources there in a place to begin, just to give some basic information for families, as you know, depending on everybody's experience and the variability of our parents coming to a school system, they may not have information about all of this. And I do just want to pause as you're thinking ahead of, oh my gosh, not all of our families speak English or read English. We do have, our website is able to be translated in other languages with that accessibility, and our resources for parents are translated in the top 6 languages for California. So you'll see some of the resources that we've begun in a place to begin. And going forward, there are like foundations of special education law. You'll see overviews of IDEA, IEP process. Our resources are built to be very short, thinking through the variability of the various readers that we have, and not making sure we have a lot of cognitive overload. So a lot of the resources will hyperlink to other materials and resources, so that as somebody wants to dive in more deeply, it's there, but it's not overwhelming the message of those different areas. So if you can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, and you'll see a lot of what we've grounded our work in this past first year is that meaningful participation. And we have developed a lot of resources around fostering family school partnerships, and really recognizing that that family voice is in engagement is really on a continuum, and helping give tools and resources for LEAs or local education agencies to really consider, are they communicating at and informing our families, or are they really engaging and hearing the voice of our families? So we've given some resources in that area as well. On the next slide, we have, obviously we're showing you the portion for the educator toolkit, or the special educator toolkit. And so there are things that, as an educator, on organization, IEP reminder cards, family communication preference surveys, so that teachers or case managers can send a survey to their families and ask, do you want to receive information via text, email, phone calls, in person? What works best for you? So really giving our case managers and teachers a variety of strategies as well, to account for parent variability. And then on the next slide, you'll see that we also have resources in before the IEP meeting. And we'll share those on the next slide. Oh, and what we have in the next slide is really the crux of the IEP meeting itself. Thank you, Melanie. The educational benefit. And we've really grounded educational benefit in these 5 key components of assessment, present levels, areas of need, measurable goals, and supports and services. A lot of our disputes with families really start because they don't feel their child is making progress. And so if we are providing educational benefit effectively to our families or to our students, their families are more likely to be satisfied with the educational services. So it really comes back to that student achievement. So on the next slide, you'll see that all of our resources are tied to these 5 key components. There are some of these key components that occur before the meeting, like an assessment, drafting present levels. There are some of these key components that occur during, well, all of them during the IEP, and then some that occur after. So you'll see what our resources are really grounded on: assessment, present levels, identifying areas of need, measurable goals, and supports and services. So on the next slide, you'll see just exactly as I shared, there's not every single key component in the section before the IEP, because there's only a few things that you can do before the IEP. You don't want to predetermine placement or anything about the IEP, but the assessment occurs and the present levels can be drafted. So on the next slide, you'll see that if somebody clicks in to say key component 2 on before the IEP, we have a host of resources there for our educators. And this is a model of what we anticipate a very similar product for our parents in the coming year. So you'll see we go through the IEP process beforehand. We have a present levels packet where we have a tool that educators can use to collect data from all of the different sources to help draft that present levels. There are building on my strengths for parents and teachers and students themselves to collect the information on the students' strengths, interests, preferences, and needs before the meeting. And then we have the RIOT protocol, which is really about the assessment process and how we're collecting data. So on the next slide, we have a sample of our key component 1 before the IEP. It really gets into prior written notices, evaluations, who's involved, what does an assessment involve, an assessment checklist for our evaluators, and any other considerations for report writing, making sure it's parent friendly and understandable, and our dual language English learners considerations. So on the next slide, you'll also see that we get into on a key component 1 assessment, explaining the assessment results. And this is during the IEP. So it's a little bit different focus, even though it's the same component, because these are things that happen during the IEP. How to explain the assessment results, how is eligibility determined, with a caveat, this is written for California, if you're participating from another state, and what to do when a student doesn't qualify, and how to document that discussion. And yes, all of our resources and materials are free. We are funded by the California Department of Education. So things are written specifically for California, but there are many things that can be universally applied across all of the states. Okay, on the next slide, we move to key component 2, and this is happening before the IEP meeting. So we're really helping guide that process of collecting the data for generating the present levels and making it a student-centered IEP, which is something that's foundational to our belief system in the IEP process. So on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about that RIOT. I know we've gotten feedback. RIOT is not always in a positive connotation, but we have done the research, and this is not something we've created. We've just kind of helped with our evaluators and educators to really make sure they're hitting all of those components of the evaluation. Go to the next slide. And so we do have a protocol to help our evaluators and help parents understand, why am I getting this rating scale? Why are they calling and asking me questions? So really trying to communicate the importance of making sure that parent voice throughout this process is incorporated, so we really know the students well. On the next slide. Okay, we talked a little bit about that present levels packet to help organize. Just wanted to let you see that since we're not live on the website. Each area of present levels that are addressed, you can click in and team members can contribute information. And you can also collect information from the parent on the Building My Strengths tab. And then on the next slide, this is the present levels and the things we address during the IEP meeting itself. So this is actually, how are you completing this? And these are based on a recent expert panel that was convened in California based on on that panel's proposed template. So a lot of these fields are based on that, but they are the federally required areas of an IEP. So please take and use. And then on the next slide, you'll see that we also during the IEP are focusing on key component 3, which is identifying and prioritizing student needs so that the goals and services can be developed. And then on the next slide, you'll see this key component 4 is tackling annual goals. And it goes through the whole process of determining the goals, establishing baseline, all of those requirements for our goal writing. It really takes the educators who are using this toolkit through. And then on the next slide is slide 5, our key component 5, we really dive into accommodations, modifications, our statewide and local assessments in California, how to document the supports and services within the IEP, and it takes them through that section and those supports of the IEP. So this is our heftiest section because this is the meat and potatoes of the IEP process. So as we go to the next slide, we do this, like I shared, we have just our small team that you saw with, 3 and a portion of me and Leo, the SELPA director from Santa Clara. We have produced this in the last year. So for the coming year, or 2025 in the spring after break, we have a section for after the IEP. We are finalizing that now. We anticipate that to be out at the start of the new calendar year. And then we also this year are releasing a toolkit for administrative designees, taking them through that same process, but what do you need to wear when your hat is the administrative designee? And then also for the general education teachers, they are vital in that IEP process. We are also collaborating with our friends at Pathways to Partnership on an IEP success guide or companion guide, and really looking at how do we emotionally show up for the IEP meeting? How can we prepare for the IEP meeting? How do we ask open-ended questions? So we're really trying to be proactive in, again, as Melanie shared, in that left side of the continuum, in supporting our families and our educators to have successful IEP meetings. So that was a lot. On the next page, or next slide, excuse me, please go to our website, stay up to date with all our resources. You can see we've got a lot on the horizon this year, and including next year, where we'll have our parent toolkit, and the following year where we'll have our student toolkit. So please join our listserv. We only do announcements of our updated resources. So, intermittently you'll receive emails from us. So please sign up for our listserv. And on the next slide, you'll see different ways to engage with us through social media, whether it is through our IEP website, through Instagram, X, or Facebook. So we hope you will join us on this journey. So thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. And last but not least, we welcome back Cheryl Thies, the Director of Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, DREDF. So Cheryl, hand it to you.
Sorry, for some reason my controls didn't want to work for a minute.
I understand.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, or I guess it's still morning here in California, but to everyone, and thank you so much to you, Heather, and also to Denise for talking about some of the initiatives that are underway. I think before I launch in, and if you could start my PowerPoint, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. I just want to say it really does take a village, and more than a village, to address the issues. And I want to speak today more from the perspective, a little bit down on the grassroots level, of what families tell us, what we hear, what we observe as parent centers and family empowerment centers and so on, in terms of what gets in the way, and more importantly, because we covered some of that last time, what we can do to make it better. So next slide, please. All right, so I want to start with some just basic tips for IEP teams, and that some of what Heather already covered is in here, but I wanted to really point it out for those of you who are on the education side of the house. I also want to note that many of us have dual roles, right? You may be in education, you may have a child with a disability, you may have a family member with a disability, you yourself may have a disability. So one of the things that we always say is that it's important to understand these issues, in part because disability is the one club anybody can join anytime. And so understanding some of the issues that families face is really important in terms of just making us all center the student. So here are the things we frequently see get in the way, and some suggestions that you can use if you're on the education side of the house. First of all, we frequently hear from families that they feel very disrespected in terms of their time mattering. So the IEP invitation is supposed to be an invitation. We're trying to schedule a meeting. We need you at the table. You're important. But what families often experience, and for reasons we fully understand in terms of timing and and calendaring and like herding cats, getting everyone on the IEP team together at the same time, is that parent will just receive a notice saying the IEP will be held at this date and time. And there's nothing that says, if this doesn't work for you, like you're a vital member of the team. If this doesn't work for you, please contact me and the person who's the right person to contact, so that we can make sure that this is at a time that's mutually agreeable. Also making sure that, to the extent that you know about language needs, that you send out these invitations or reports or requests, at least the introduction to them, in the parent's language. So we frequently hear from families who say, I didn't even know it was an IEP invitation or, meeting scheduling, because I didn't know how to read it. So I had to get it interpreted. It's really important to be proactive with families and to ask ahead of time about whether the family may need accommodations, interpreters, just what do you need to participate effectively is a really good question. How can we support you to be there? As a local large school district here in the San Francisco Bay Area recently told me that about 50% of families don't come to the IEP meeting. We need to change that. So, and I know this is a really tricky one, because a lot of families will be under the impression that they have a right to see assessments that actually aren't written yet, or aren't done. And that's a real challenge. But when possible, even if it's a draft, trying to share them is important for two reasons. I think, first of all, just to show that, there is a process underway, and for families to think about whether there's things they want to make sure they address. But also because it's really hard to participate in a meeting, especially an eligibility meeting, but I think many others, when you're hearing for the first time that the team thinks your child may be on the autism spectrum, may have an intellectual disability, may have, a mental health challenge that is really the category where they fit best. Parents will be sitting there often processing that information for the first time, and they're done. They're not in your meeting anymore. And so that's another advantage of, getting information out when you can. And finally, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to let families know from the very beginning of the process that there are systems like community advisory committees for special education. There are, some schools have special education PTAs, that there are ways to get involved, because there are a lot of challenges that we all face: funding, training, staffing, but we all need to be on the same team in terms of working to resolve those issues. So I will often tell families, number one job is for you to participate effectively and advocate for what you see your child needs. On the other hand, you also need to be part of the school team in terms of how do we make this system work better for everyone. And that includes our teachers, people in education, our families, and our students, most importantly. Next slide. A couple of things, and I love how you guys divided into before the IEP, during the IEP, after the IEP, because that's really how we think about it too. Some things that frequently come up, we hear from families, and I just met with someone from our State Council on Developmental Disabilities yesterday who shared this out of the blue, and I thought, wow, I'm so glad I included it in the slide. Something as simple as asking the parent how they want to be addressed. So I'll hear teams say things, well, grandma, and then I'll hear from grandma, I'm not calling them teacher, and one tip that we have is that, especially in these early meetings where you don't know anyone, have some labels out for people to write down, put on their, clothing, how they want to be addressed. Just, what's your name, what's your role? And that way the team can, from the get-go, introduce themselves. Most families can't remember 10 minutes after the meeting started who you said you were or what you said you do. And so those kinds of labels can be helpful. And also just in terms of saying, please tell me how you would like to be addressed. First name, last name. There's a lot of cultural variation there, and then personal preference as well. Focusing on student strengths, I included this because I often see, and I think most of us who are in the parent world will see, that there may be some attention to the student's strengths, but they're not really strengths. So saying something like Susie's an adorable little girl with pigtails and freckles is not a strength. Saying that Susie is empathetic and really interested in, socializing, even if it's challenging for her right now, those are the things families want to hear, in part because, and I'm jumping bullet points here, because parents, we really want to know that you know our child. And if you don't know our child because you're new to the team or you're an administrator, that you want to learn about them in the meeting, that's a genuine concern. And so when you talk about a student's strengths, you're signaling, I'll give you an example. I saw Johnny in the cafeteria and he didn't know where to sit. And, your child reached out, invited them in and they were so grateful. So those are the kinds of things that really set a tone for a meeting. And we all know the pet peeve around required team membership, right, and participation. So it is really common for parents to show up and the required team isn't there. And instead of saying, I'm sorry, our occupational therapist couldn't be here today, something came up, would you be okay with excusing them or would you like to reschedule? And most of the time, in my experience, families will say, let's go ahead, but how can I get that input from that team member? It's just glossed over. Or the general education teacher will come in and be there for 5 minutes and the bell rings and they say, oh, sorry, I've got to get to my class. So you're signaling something there about your commitment to inclusion, to least restrictive environment, and so on. So I really want to emphasize, if there's nothing else you take away from the education side today, that being transparent when there are problems is so helpful to families because it signals trust and respect. We don't want a family to find out when they are worried about their child's speech and language and they ask for a meeting that the speech and language therapist has been on maternity leave for 3 months and no one told the parent. But that happens. And the family had no idea, or that the para educators in one district recently, they said they have a 50% absenteeism rate. I said, what is your process for letting the parent know that the service wasn't provided? It's once in a while, we get it. But when it's, that much of the time, and then you're reporting out on goals or services or proposing to change a placement for a student to something perhaps more restrictive, and the parent doesn't know that half the time that the current IEP isn't being implemented because of these challenges we're all aware of, that's a problem. And parents will feel betrayed. And, some parents experience that by being very quiet and just not saying anything. Some parents experience that. And by the way, I hope you all know when I say parent, I mean the person who's holding those education rights. Sometimes it's a kinship parent or a foster parent or whatever. Sometimes it's the youth themselves. But when that happens, there's a sense that, things are being hidden. I have to be careful. I can't believe what you say. And often it's just that nobody thought to do it, but it really interrupts that trust. And finally, during the meeting, very, very often what we see across, at least here in California, is the IEP team is met, and then a signature page will be passed to the parent. So as soon as you sign this, we can get these services started without really, letting the parent know that they can take some time, they can ask for things to be translated, that there can be a part 2 meeting if you feel like all of the issues weren't addressed. And so, opening up a little space for the fact that it's not that we're running this meeting and you're a guest here and can you sign and we're all good to go, but really saying, it's really important that we hear from you. And that if you need more time or you need to meet with us or have something translated, we can do that. Next slide. Okay, and so for parents, because, we have our own set of challenges that get in the way in IEP meetings for sure. One of the things we tell people is don't IEP alone. You can bring support, and it can be really helpful. And it doesn't have to be some expert. That can be helpful sometimes, but it can be your sister. It can be your Sunday school provider who can talk about how the child is there. It can be, the after school program. It can be just your best friend, because these meetings do get hard sometimes. They can get really emotional. And being able to participate effectively means being able to kind of process and regulate your emotions, and having somebody there to say, hey, let's take a break before you lose it, can be very, very helpful. The other thing we tell families is, if you aren't understanding it, it's probably because it isn't clear, right? And there's a lot of specialized language and special education we all throw around, our terminology. And so to say, I'm sorry, I'm just not following. Can you give me an example? Could you tell me more about that? Feeling like, again, and in the last presentation, I said, it's not just a seat at the table. And what I meant was, you're supposed to be served a meal. It's not just that you get to sit there and be a passive observer. We really need you in this process, and you hold key information. And also there's key information that the team wants to share with you. And what parents will sometimes say is that they experience that as very top down and authoritarian. The team is saying, this is what we see, this is the reality. But instead of inviting the parent in by saying, what about for you in other settings? When you are socializing in other settings, or you're at the playground, or, are you seeing similar challenges or problems? Does this sound like, did you know this is happening? And so that can be very helpful. One of the most common misunderstandings I think that families have is that somehow the process that Heather laid out really beautifully about, first we get information and develop assessments, and we call that whole thing an evaluation. And then we figure out, where is this child right now? A lot of families work under the impression, unless we correct them, that there's an IEP for autism. There's an IEP for a speech and language disorder. They don't understand what the I in IEP means and just how powerful it really is. So, we try to explain when we're training families that, a child can have a designation of something like an other health impairment, and it could be diabetes, it could be asthma, and it could be ADHD. And every IEP will look different, and we don't write IEPs based on the label. But families don't really get that. And sometimes inadvertently, the team will sort of signal that it is sort of an IEP for autism. So, for example, a parent was telling me recently that after the IEP evaluations were reviewed and eligibility was determined and they went through present levels, they just said, they jump ahead to placement. They jumped ahead to placement and said, our kids with autism do so well in this special day class in room 6. And that's, we've jumped over the whole issue of services, supports, and then to ask that question last. What does this child, what kind of placement in IEP isn't a place, but a program? Where do we deliver that's least restrictive? Families will also tell us that they felt like a more restrictive placement was proposed right from the beginning, as if it was, going to be something that was where the student get lots of extra support, but not being provided an opportunity to visit it, to learn about it, to ask questions. We have questions that we share with parents that they can ask when they're visiting, and so on. Making sure that you ask those basic questions, like, can you help me understand? Or when one of the common pet peeves that families report to us is, oh, we don't do that. We don't have that. Instead of saying, how is that individualized to this student? Let's talk about why you're thinking that might be necessary. So, as a parent, to be able to say, rather than getting into conflict in that moment, just to say, it'd be really helpful to me if you could provide me with a written policy that says I have to have a diagnosis before I can have a 504 plan or an IEP or whatever. And then requesting specifics, what, why, how, when, who. So it's a big issue where the IEP will just not be what we call camera ready. We tell families, if you're going to move from San Francisco to New York tomorrow, you should have an IEP clear enough that the new school district will understand roughly, as closely as possible, how to implement that IEP. So things like having the individual box and the group box both checked without any delineation of how and when and why that will be provided one-on-one, and when will it be in a group, and so on. Or statements like, oh, the services are all just wrapped into the special day class without, and the parents often don't know to say, tell me more. How does that happen? And some of those approaches can be incredibly helpful, but families, and I think it was you, Denise, who said, it's what families really want to know is that the students making progress, right? That's what they want to see. So, the students who've been in this program for a year have been able to go back and be in a less restrictive environment. That kind of information is helpful. And then I think one of the common, and I'll call it what I think it is, it's a mistake, it's an advocacy, ineffective advocacy strategy, is to focus families often focus on what's not working. And that's really hard for the education team. You didn't do this and you aren't doing that, and this happened and that happened, instead of, I'm concerned about this issue, but I have an idea. Can I share my idea? Can we try something? Can we come back together and gather some data and information after we try something for a certain amount of time? And so, there's a lot of ideas that families will have that they will think will solve the problem. And one of the most common ones that I think we all could agree we're seeing is, my child needs a one-on-one aid. It's one of the most common requests we see. And I experienced that myself as a parent many years ago with my little one, where a wonderful occupational therapist said, I think we should move to group OT. And I said, absolutely not. I know my child needs one-to-one support. She really has great progress to make and really needs intensive services and so on. But the occupational therapist took the moment to say, could we just try it? Because sometimes what I see with your child is that she's really struggling and has been through so much medical and physical therapy that it's hard for her to participate, but she's so inherently social that I can't help but wonder if she was in a group, if she wouldn't buy in more. So I was like, oh, okay, we can try it. I don't think it's going to work. And it worked like a charm. And so, offering solutions, but also, asking other people on the team who may have more experience with a wide variety of kids about what works and what doesn't work can be very, very valuable. Some of the other challenges that parents face relate to simple things like, you scheduled a 30-minute meeting to discuss my child's eligibility. And so, rather than focus on, this is obviously a sign they don't care about whether I come or participate, to say, we have real issues around timing, resources, funding, things that are, getting in the way. But when you see that an IEP meeting's been scheduled for 30 minutes and you can't imagine that your concerns will be addressed, write your own parent concerns letter. Talk about what your issues are, what you want to make sure gets discussed. And then it becomes sort of the next logical step to say, so this is why I don't think 30 minutes is enough. Or I'm going to need an interpreter. And that, we all know that doubles the length of the meeting in many cases. So maybe just logistically, we're going to have 2 or 3 meetings, but we're going to make sure that parent's effectively participating by recognizing up front that because there'll be an interpreter, there's going to be a greater need for more time and so on. Next slide. We tell families all the time, you are the expert on your child. You hold that, in most cases, that developmental history and also that vision for the future. You are the one who sits at the end of your child's bed at night and wonders what 10 years down the road looks like. Often from the teacher's perspective or the team's perspective, we're trying to work on specific goals this year or in the next couple of years, but we're not thinking about when the child's 40, what that's going to look like. And that's, a perspective that's really important for the team to know, and to be able to say, here's what works for us at home. One of the common complaints that parents share with us about how IEP meetings go wrong for them is that when they try to offer information about problems they're having with homework or things at home, the team will say, well, that's all home problems. We're focusing on the educational environment, without making sure that the parent is really there and participating and sharing what's happening in terms of education in the home environment, because that is part of the evaluation and assessment data that we need. Being sure to listen to the school experts too, and asking what they think and asking for examples is really helpful. Knowing that you can call a meeting when concerns arise. It's amazing to me how many families don't realize this. We tell families, be hard on the issue, soft on the people. If you don't understand something, say something. I think one of the wonderful things that Cadre does, and their work is just invaluable for families when we send them the continuum and the resources, is that disagreement is not disrespect. It's just the way life is. And so being able to say, I respectfully disagree, and here's why, and here's an example, or could you show me an example, is how we get that buy-in. And then finally, making sure you center your child as an individual. Okay, next slide. I'm gonna wrap up. We wanna make sure we have time for questions. I will just end with two things. One is the language of IDEA itself that I think we all need to keep in mind as we're doing this work, which is that disability is a natural part of human experience. This is right in the language of the law. And that we have a shared vision, all of us, which is to make sure that our children are prepared for meaningful futures. Next slide. And then, there are many resources. Here in California, we have a great network of family empowerment centers. We have family resource centers. Federally, we have parent training and information centers. So make sure that if you're an educator, you direct family to these resources. And if you're a parent, that you learn about them and how they can help. And I'll stop there, and we can move on to questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. So thank you again to our presenters from the California Department of Education's Constituents Office, Denise Lambert from High Quality IEPs, Heather DeFede and team, and Cheryl Thies from DREDF. We appreciate your energy and your time. And now we have some time for questions. And there's one question that came in that I think the entire panel could address. And it's one that we at Cadre have had to grapple with as well. How do you promote the good work you're doing? How do you promote your services? How do you promote the resources that you're developing? And Heather, if it's okay, we'll go ahead and start with you, because I think that's yours is brand new. So
Sure.
what are you doing?
So we're still working and thinking mostly with our families. We have a strong partnership with our family empowerment centers. There's a network of them through our Seeds of Partnership in California. So we collaborate with the Seeds of Partnership director. We meet with her monthly. As part of our grant, we have also contracted with our local Family Resource Center / Family Empowerment Center here in San Diego. And we meet with them regularly as well. In addition to our regular meetings with them, we've also co-presented. We're co-presenting with Seeds of Partnership next week to different community groups. And so I think really just having that collaboration, reaching out and knowing your family partners, it helps get the word out. And as was just shared with the DREDF presentation by Cheryl, we as educators also need to make sure that families are aware of those family resources and materials. So I think making sure our educators are aware of these resources, and also us as educators partnering with those family groups.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would like to just echo, this is Aubrey Folk with Pathways to Partnership. Like Heather just shared, we're also part of the California statewide system of support. So we can drop that website in there too. And that's a nice network that we all come together and meet regularly to share what we are all doing in our own projects and trying to break down those silos and all work together collaboratively.
And I would just add a specific tip. This is Cheryl Thies from DREDF, which is that when you have a family who becomes eligible for special education for the first time, and at every meeting, at least the annual meetings, that you, number one, slip in information about the Community Advisory Committee as an opportunity to join and what it is and why it's important, and that you include in the Notice of Parents' Rights these places, because some districts are wonderful about it. And some aren't so great about it, and they'll say where you can get help, reach out to us. And so we want families to know that there's other ways to get help and what those resources are.
I just want to add that when we opened the constituent's office, it was in October, like I stated. We had actually gone to the SELPA meeting that month and shared the opening of the office. But also, we've also developed a webpage that talks about the constituent's office and have shared that with our partners so that they can also spread the word about the constituent's office. And what I'm finding in the work that we're doing when I'm reaching out to SELPA directors, they're aware and they're also sharing with families now and, with community members as well. This is just in my conversation and in reaching out to them. So word of mouth is definitely getting out about the constituent's office. But yes, we would love to get more information out about the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I'm really excited to share that with families, Denise. That's great. I think we often have referred families to what we called the procedural safeguards and referral services, right? But they had a hard time getting through or connecting or whatever, and this just sounds much more family friendly. So that's exciting.
When I was at a state agency, one of our mantras were, what have you done for me lately? And it was just an idea of we need to always be getting out and preaching the word of the dispute resolution options in the program and what we do and what we offer. We had facilitation program, we had mediation, and being available. And then the second thing that I think is really valuable and is evidenced and modeled by this presentation is working together, going into each other's playgrounds and presenting with each other's audiences and modeling the kind of work that you're doing right now. It works wonders in terms of getting the word out and showing that there's a full range of options and we're all in support of them.
Yeah, I think one of our favorite things in the parent centers is when we get calls from educators, who will just say, I want to make sure my parents know their rights, or I do a training, or, how can I make sure families can participate? And it happens, and it's wonderful when it happens. And so, just to support and to echo what Melanie just said, that we collaborate together because we really are on the same team, although there are definitely times where it can feel like people are, on different sides of the house. So we want to make sure that we model that in our work. And I said this last time, when families see that you can come in a meeting, that you can be flexible, that you can disagree and try to find solutions, and that we're centering not just the student, because I think that's too vague, but we're centering progress, meaningful progress that every student can learn, and that we're not just about lowering expectations, which is what families worry about. They do, but that we're talking about how to make sure that students can fulfill that vision of future education, employment, independent. Although I've recently been saying interdependent living, because I think the goal is not for every student to be set up in their own apartment living independently, but to be a meaningful part of a community and so on. And so I think if we keep that in mind, we can make a lot of progress.
I went back again when I was in a state agency. I would get invited as the dispute resolution person to come to a presentation for the superintendents, and the opportunity was richer if I brought somebody from the parent center with me. And so we would present together, because the idea of, hey, do you know who your parent center is? Oh, administrators of special education in the school districts, or administrators of the schools themselves, the districts themselves, and any opportunity to share the stage, it certainly was beneficial to the entire goal. We don't have other questions specific. We have a question about providing workshops that's specific for Heather. So Heather, I'll let you go ahead and answer that one. Are there any closing thoughts that you might have?
Well, I'll answer that, and then I'll jump to closing thoughts, and then I'll pass it off to Denise and to Sheila. So with the high quality IEPs, we actually, about 30 minutes before this presentation started, we did do a presentation to all of the Family Empowerment Centers network in California. So yes, we did provide trainings for FECs, or Family Empowerment Centers, This year, our focus is really educators. So a lot of our conferences and presentations are really focusing on the educator's journey. As we release our parent IEP toolkit next year, we anticipate doing even more presentations with our parent community and different opportunities over the next year where families can have our resources. So yes, we do, and we look forward to more. And just closing thoughts, thank you. Obviously we have shared a continuum of the dispute process as Melanie opened us up with perfectly. And whether you're engaging in at the Department of Education with an ombudsman through a dispute, starting way early on with just prevention, making sure educators understand the child and the family's needs and wants, and developing IEP. And then as if there's still disputes, which they will happen, we are not going to solve everything, but knowing your opportunities through parent training information centers across the country. So thank you for the opportunity.
Sure.
Yeah, and I would just end with, I think that many years ago at a federal Office of Special Education Programs meeting that I attended, we were talking a lot about moving away from a compliance-driven model, to a progress outcomes-driven model. And I hope that people, who listen to us all today, that we can all continue to work on this, because so many of the problems that come up, I think, because there's anxiety and fear. We didn't meet the timelines. Maybe we just won't say anything and hope the parent won't know. So, by being a little bit more transparent about the fact there are real challenges we face, but they're systemic challenges that are happening across the country, and they're impacting everyone, our schools, our communities, our families, and our students most of all, that we can get to the point where we're focused more on, how do we solve the problem, and moving away from, did we check the box that said the parent got an invitation?
Cheryl? Anybody else?
Well,
Aubrey or?
I just want
go
to say
ahead.
thank you for the opportunity to be here today again. And just echoing what Heather and Cheryl said, that, I think it's powerful when we all can come together and work together for the betterment of our families and communities. And so I just encourage us to continue to do that, because I think we can make a difference.
Thank you, Denise.
There was a question about early childhood, so I'm also putting in the chat another one of our special education resource leads, CalEXE, California Early Childhood Special Education Network. So I'll pop that into the chat as well.
Okay. And if anybody has any other resources that are relevant, please do share them in the chat or reach out to our panelists. I think they'd be happy to share their resources. So with that, I think that we will bring it to a close. Are any other thoughts before I jump back in? And
I have one final thought, because I talk too much. And that thought is that it's really an important time to focus on what works, and to also understand that although there are a lot of problems in special education, we've made tremendous progress. We've increased graduation rates. We've seen students be more included. And so I think there's often a focus for all of us on the problems, but I think it's also important to celebrate the successes, because there are many of them.
sure, that's a wonderful way to end the sentiment here. So thank you. Kadri, I'd like to again thank our panelists. Thank you for bringing this information to bear. This has been wonderful. And just as a closing remarks, we'd like to remind everyone to save the date for Kadri's National Symposium on Dispute Resolution. It's happening October 21st and 23rd, or through the 23rd in Portland, Oregon. And we are currently accepting proposals. So those are going to be the link's going to be in the chat. We also have on the horizon on January 23rd, we're really excited to bring you a webinar from Dr. Tricia Jones from Temple University, who's going to share information about building trust, breaking blame, and healing shame, conflict coaching conversations for constructive futures. And you can now register for that on our website. And then, as Noella has already posted in the chat, we really appreciate your time, and we know you're busy. But as a grant agency, we very much need your feedback and ask that you do take a minute to share your thoughts with us today about this presentation by doing the survey. And know that you can find a multitude of resources on our website. You can reach out to us if you need help supporting your work. Do consider signing up for our newsletter. We have a one coming out here very shortly. And from us at Cadre, we wish you the happiest of holidays, and we look forward to our collaborations in the new year. So peace to all, and thank you again. Goodbye.